Part 5. The Task of National Renewal. All the good things we see around us, from the physical infrastructure to our high standards of living to our exceptional freedoms, are direct results of America's unity, stability, and justice, all of which, in turn, rest on the bedrock of our founding principles. Yet today our country is in danger of throwing this inheritance away. The choice before us now is clear. Will we choose the truths of the Declaration, or will we fall prey to the false theories that have led too many nations to tyranny? It's our mission, all of us, to restore our national unity by rekindling a brave and honest love for our country, and by raising new generations of citizens who not only know the self-evident truths of our founding, but then act worthy of them. This great project of national renewal depends on true education, not merely training in particular skills, but the formation of citizens. To remain a free people, we must have the knowledge, strength, and virtue of a free people. From families and schools to popular culture and public policy, we must begin teaching our founding principles and the character necessary to live out these principles. This includes restoring patriotic education that teaches the truth about America. Now, that doesn't mean ignoring the faults in our past, but rather viewing our history clearly and wholly with reverence and love. We must also prioritize personal responsibility in the fulfilling of duties we have toward one another as citizens. But above all, we must stand up to the petty tyrants in every sphere who demand that we speak only of America's sins while denying her greatness. At home, at school, at the workplace, in the world, it is the people, and only the people, who have the power to stand up for America and defend our way of life. The role of the family. By their very nature, families are the first educators, teaching children how to treat others with respect, make wise decisions, exercise patience, think for themselves, and steadfastly guard their God-given liberties. It's good mothers and good fathers, above all others, who form good people and good citizens. This is why America's founding fathers often echoed the great Roman statesman Cicero in referring to the family as the seminary of the Republic. They understood that the habits and morals shaped in the home determine the character of our communities and ultimate fate of our Constitution and our country. When our children see their mother and father hard at work, they learn the dignity of labor and the reward of self-discipline. When adults speak out against dangerous doctrines that threaten our freedoms and values, children learn the time-tested concept of free expression and the courageous spirit of American independence. When parents serve a neighbor in need, they model charity. They prove that every human being has inherent worth. And when families pray together, they acknowledge together the providence of the Almighty God, who gave all of us our sacred liberty. For the American Republic to endure, families must remain strong and reclaim their duty to raise up moral, responsible citizens who love America, who embrace the gifts and responsibilities of freedom and self-government. Teaching America. The primary duty of schools is to teach students the basic skills needed to function in society, such as reading, writing, and mathematics. As discussed in Appendix 4, our founders also recognized a second and essential task. Educators must convey a sense of enlightened patriotism that equips each generation with the knowledge of America's founding principles, a deep reverence for their liberties, and a profound love of their country. Make no mistake, the love we're talking about is something different than romantic or familial love. something that cannot be imposed by teachers or schools or government edicts, least of all in a free country. Like any love worthy of the name, it must be embraced freely and be strong and unsentimental, enough to coexist with elements of disappointment, criticism, dissent, opposition, and even shame that come with a moral maturity and open eyes. But it is love all the same, and without the deep foundation it supplies, our republic will perish. State and local governments, not the federal government, are responsible for adopting curricula that teach children the principles that unite, inspire, and ennoble all Americans. This includes the lessons on the Revolutionary War, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutional Convention. Educators should teach an accurate history of how the permanent principles of America's founding have been challenged and preserved since 1776. By studying America's true heritage, students learn to embrace and preserve the triumphs of their forefathers while identifying and avoiding their mistakes. States and school districts should reject any curriculum that promotes one-sided partisan opinions, activist propaganda, or factional ideologies that demean America's heritage, dishonor our heroes, or deny our principles. Anytime teachers or administrators promote political agendas in the classroom, they abuse their platform and dishonor every family who trusts them with their children's education and moral development. Quote, "Law and liberty cannot rationally become the object of our love," wrote Founding Father James Wilson, "unless they first become the object of our knowledge," end quote. Students who are taught to understand America's exceptional principles and America's powerful history grow into strong citizens who respect the rule of law and protect the country they know and love. A scholarship of freedom. Universities in the United States are often today hotbeds of anti-Americanism, libel, and censorship that combine to generate in students and in the broader culture, at the very least, a disdain and worse, outright hatred of our country. The founders insisted that universities should be at the core of preserving American republicanism by instructing students and future leaders of its true basis and instilling in them not just an understanding, but a reverence for its principles and core documents. Today, our higher education system does almost exactly the opposite. Colleges peddle resentment and contempt for American principles and history alike, in the process weakening attachment to our shared heritage. In order to build up a healthy, united citizenry, scholars, students, and all Americans must reject the false and fashionable ideologies that obscure facts, ignore historical context, and tell America's story solely as one of oppression and victimhood, rather than one of imperfection, but also unprecedented achievement towards freedom and happiness and fairness for all. Historic revisionism that tramples honest scholarship and historic truth shames Americans by highlighting only the sins of their ancestors and teaches claims of systemic racism that can only be eliminated by more discrimination is an ideology intended to manipulate opinions much more than educate minds. Deliberately destructive scholarship shatters the civic bonds that unite all of us. It silences the discourse essential to a free society by breeding division, distrust, and hatred among its citizens. And it is the intellectual force behind so much of the violence in our cities, suppression of free speech in our universities, and defamation of our treasured national statues and symbols. To restore our society, academics must return to their vocation of relentlessly pursuing the truth and engaging in honest scholarship that seeks to understand the world and America's place in it. The American mind Americans yearn for timeless stories and noble heroes that inspire them to be good, brave, diligent, daring, generous, honest, kind, and compassionate. Millions of Americans devour histories of the American Revolution and Civil War, and they thrill to the tales of Washington and Jefferson, Hamilton and Franklin, Lincoln and Grant, Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass. We still read the tales of Hawthorne and Melville and Twain and Poe, the poems of Whitman and Dickinson. On Independence Day, we still hum John Philip Sousa's Stars and Stripes Forever. We even sing along to Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land. Americans applaud the loyalty, the love, the kindness shared by the March Sisters and Little Women. Revere the rugged liberty of the cowboys and old westerns. Cheer the adventurous spirit of the young Tom Sawyer. These great works have withstood the test of time because they speak to eternal truths and embody the American spirit. It's up to America's artists and authors and filmmakers, musicians, social media, influencers, and other cultural leaders to carry on this tradition by once again giving shape and voice to America's self-understanding, to be what Jefferson called an expression of the American mind. To them falls the creative task of writing stories and songs and scripts to help restore every American's conviction to embrace the good, to lead a virtuous life, and to act with an attitude of hope toward a better and bolder future for themselves, for their families, and for the entire nation and world. Reverence for the laws. The principles of equality and consent mean that all are equal before the law. No one is above the law, and no one is privileged to just ignore the law, just as no one is outside of the law in terms of protection. In his Lyceum address, a young Abraham Lincoln warned of two results of growing disregard for the rule of law. The first is mob rule. Whenever the vicious portion of our population shall be permitted to gather in bands of hundreds and thousands and burn churches, ravage and rob provision stores, throw printing presses into rivers, shoot editors, and hang and burn obnoxious persons at pleasure and without impunity, depend on it, this government cannot last. But Lincoln also warned of the great ambition of those who thirst for distinction, and although, quote, he would as willingly, perhaps even more so, acquire it by doing good as harm. Yet that opportunity being past has nothing left to be done in the way of building up. So he will set boldly to the task of pulling down. Whether the left or right, both mob rule and tyrannical rule violate the rule of law because both are ruled by the base of passions rather than the better angels of our nature. Both equally threaten our constitutional order. When crimes go unpunished, or when good men do nothing, the lawless in spirit will become lawless in practice, leading to violence and demagoguery. Patriotic education must have at its center a respect for the rule of law, including the Declaration and Constitution, so that we may have what John Adams called, quote, a government of laws and not of men, end quote. In the end, Lincoln's solution must be ours. Let every American, every lover of liberty, every well-wisher to his posterity swear by the blood of the Revolution never to violate in the least particular the laws of the country, and to never tolerate their violation by others. As the Patriots of '76 did to the support of the Declaration of Independence, so, too, the support of the Constitution and laws let every American pledge his life, his property, and his sacred honor. Let every man remember that to violate the law is to trample on the blood of his father, to tear the character of his own and his children's liberty. Let reverence for the laws be breathed by every American mother. to the lisping babe that prattles on her lap. Let it be taught in schools and seminaries and in colleges. Let it be written in primers and spelling books, in almanacs. Let it be preached from the pulpit, proclaimed in the legislative halls, and enforced in the courts of justice." End quote. Conclusion. On the 150th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, President Calvin Coolidge raised an immortal banner in his time. "It is often asserted," he said, "that the world has made a great deal of progress since 1776, and therefore we may very well discard their conclusions for something more modern. But that reasoning cannot be applied to this great charter. If all men are created equal, that's final. If they're endowed with inalienable rights, that is final. If governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, that is final. No advance, no progress can be made beyond these propositions." End quote. America's founding principles are true not because any generation, including our own, has lived up to them perfectly, but because they are based upon the eternal truths of the human condition. They are rooted in our capacity for evil and power, for good, our longing for truth and striving for justice, our need for order, and our love of freedom. Above all else, these principles recognize the worth, equality, potential, dignity, and glory of each and every man, woman, and child created in the image of God. Throughout our history, our heroes, men and women, young and old, black and white, of many faiths, and from all parts of the world, have changed America for the better, not by abandoning these truths, but by appealing to them. Upon these universal ideas, they built a great nation, unified a strong people, and formed a beautiful way of life that's worth defending. To be an American means something noble and good. It means treasuring freedom and embracing the vitality of self-government. We are shaped by the beauty, bounty, and wilderness of our continent. We are united by the glory of our history. We are distinguished by the American virtues of openness, honesty, optimism, determination, generosity, confidence, kindness, hard work, courage, hope. That's who we are. Our principles did not create these virtues, but they laid the groundwork for them to grow and spread and forge America into the most just and glorious country in all of human history. Now, as we approach the 250th anniversary of our independence, we must resolve to teach future generations of Americans an accurate history of our country so that we all learn and cherish our founding principles. Once again, we must renew the pride and gratitude we have for this incredible nation that we're all blessed to call home. When we appreciate America for what she truly is, we know that our Declaration is worth preserving, our Constitution worth defending, our fellow citizens worth loving, and our country worth fighting for. It is our task now to renew this commitment. So we proclaim, in the words of our forefathers used 2.5 centuries ago for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.